الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So today, inshallah, tonight we'll be continuing discussing the book that is titled Umdatu Saalik, and the book is authored by Ibn Raqib al-Misri, one of the ulama of the Shafi'iyah. So for this particular, or a part of the preparation for Ramadan, that we have decided to discuss this particular chapter of this book that cover Ahkam as-Siyam. So we had started in two previous lessons. In the first lesson that we have an introduction that we discuss concerning the book, the author, and also what is of some of the, and also the matter of Imam Shafi'i alayhi rahmatullahi ta'ala. Then we started discussing the book. We already discussed some of the points that you have mentioned in this book regarding of those that are required to fast. So what are the criteria that it becomes the criteria, if in place, that becomes compulsory upon a person to fast the month of Ramadan. So we discussed those matters regarding who should fast, those that are exempt from fasting, and also cases regarding certain individuals if their situation was to change, or people who are in certain situations such as musafir, also the person who's the nufasa, the one who's in a menstrual cycle. So what's the case regarding him? Also the person who's marid, the one who's ill, was his case. So we have covered some of those matters. Also he mentioned matters regarding the person who accepts Islam, who was a kafir that accepted Islam in the month of Ramadan, what is expected from them regarding Siyam. The person who was majnoon, the person was insane, then gained back sanity, then what's become of his, the ruling pertaining to his case in the month of Ramadan, and others that they have mentioned, and also the child that have reached the age of puberty in the month of Ramadan, what become of their state, or the ruling that pertain to them regarding the month of Ramadan. Then he ended regarding, or then he started to discuss the next discussion. He mentioned yubih al-fitr, those cases where it becomes a person's allowed for a person to break up their fast, those cases where it's allowed for a person to break off their fast. We have discussed, as he mentioned here, ghalabatul jaw wal ashash, that a person who is going through extreme hunger and thirst, that they are allowed to break their fast. He mentioned bihayt yaksha al-halaq wal marad, where the person who's experiencing severe hunger or thirst, or having that if they believe that it can bring about their destruction, or it can bring about an illness upon them or sickness upon them, then they are allowed to break off their fast. Then he mentioned case regarding where we had stopped, as-safar al-qasr, where he mentioned safar al-qasr, that the person who is a traveler, وَإِنْ فَارِقْ الْأُمْرَانِ قَبْلَ الْفَجْرِ, and then he mentions وَإِنْ نَوَاهُ مِنَ اللَّيْلِ فَإِنْ سَافِرْ بَعْدُ فَلَا وَالْفِطْرُ لِلْمُسَافِرِ أَفْضَلُ إِنْ دَرَّهُ الصوم وإلا فالصوم أفضل. So the next of the case that he mentioned, that we can somewhat we started this discussion regarding the person with the musafir. So the case of the musafir, what is allowed or what not allowed for the person who is said to be a traveler. So they have mentioned here regarding concerning, as the ulama have mentioned, with the ittifaq between the ulama. So an ittifaq between the ulama, so an agreement between the ulama or the fuqaha, that they mentioned that the person who is a musafir, that is allowed for that person to, while traveling in the month of Ramadan, that is allowed for them to break their fast. So they mentioned that ala anna lil musafir yatarakhas lil fitr wa alayhi qada. So the person who is a traveler in the month of Ramadan, that if he is traveling and he chooses to break his fast, which is allowed to do so, and they mentioned that person, he has to make up those days that are missed. So the days that are missed, then that has to be made up. And the evidence for this, they mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned Surah Al-Baqarah, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيدٌ أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامِ الْأُخَرِ. So regarding concerning, Allah mentioned that فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ, that the one who is amongst you, meaning the Muslims, and is marid, أو على سفر, or the person is traveling, فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامِ أُخَرِ. So the person should make up those days that are missed. So they apply to these individuals, these cases of the person who is said to be marid during Ramadan, as we had covered before. If he was to miss days during Ramadan, those days are to be made up after, if he's able. And the second case is the case of the person who is a traveler. So if he missed any days, or the days that are missed in Ramadan, those days are to be made up after Ramadan, those days to be made up after Ramadan. So that's concerning the matter. Then they discuss, there was mentioned an ijma that a person is allowed, as mentioned by An-Nawawi and also Ibn Khudama, Ibn Hazm and others, that ijma, the person allowed to break their fast who's a traveler. The next thing they have mentioned, we had mentioned that this applies regarding a person that is traveling, mentioned Safar al-Qasr, that a person have traveled a certain distance. So for the person to give, or the person who's allowed these concessions regarding break of his fast, and also other concession that he must have traveled a certain distance. That distance, they mentioned, should be that where the persons are, where it mentioned that the distance at one, as we said, the person who have traveled beyond, we mentioned 50 miles, or then the person is allowed to break his fast. Then the discussion, the person who it is below this, between two cities, is then it goes back to the work of the custom of the people is between these 2 points or these 2 cities, is traveling between them considered to be safar or not. Then that goes back to the urf of the people. So then in those cases where if it is considered to be between point A and point B, 2 different cities, that the people do consider this to be a travel, even though it's less than 50 miles, then it is taken as such as a person may travel for a distance of 30 miles. And between those 2 cities, they consider that distance is a travel for them. Then the person have the right as a musafir, and of those right that the person can not fast. The person can not fast. The next of the discussion between the ulama regarding that matter, as they discuss concerning that, according to A'immatul Arba, that sahha sawm fi safar, that a person who fasts while he's traveling, then is siyam, breaking of his fast, it is valid. So if the person choose not to fast while traveling, then is traveling, and then this is considered to be, the person who sahha to sawm, the person who is traveling and he chooses to fast. So the person who is traveling and he chooses to fast while traveling, then according to A'immatul Arba, that the person that is siyam is still valid. His siyam is still valid, and he does not need to make up this after. And this is mentioned in the hadith of Aisha radhiyallahu anha, where they mentioned regarding that Hamza ibn Amr al-Aslami, that he said to the Prophet alayhi salam, asum fi safar, should I fast while I'm traveling? Wakana, did I mention regarding the case of Hamza ibn Amr al-Aslami, he mentioned that Wakana kathir as-siyam, that this person, that he was known that he would fast often, that he used to fast often. فقال, and the Prophet ﷺ said to the person, وَإِن شِئْتَ فَصُمْ, if you wish, then you can fast. وَإِن شِئْتَ فَأَفْتِرْ, so if you wishes, while you're traveling, you can fast, and also if you choose, you can break your fast. And that hadith that they mentioned in Bukhari and Muslim. So it shows regarding that the person who does fast while they are traveling in the month of Ramadan, that fast is still considered to be a valid siyam while they are traveling. Then and then you have other cases where the Prophet ﷺ, concerning the hadith of Anas, the Prophet mentioned, كُنَّا نُسَافِرْ مَا نَبِيَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ وَلَمْ يُعِبْ الصَّاهِمْ عَلَى مُفْتِرٍ, that the hadith of Anas mentioned that we used to travel the Prophet ﷺ, and that you'll find the ones who are fasting, they would not per se criticize those who are not fasting, and also vice versa, the ones that are not fasting didn't criticize those that are fasting. And that hadith also in Bukhari and Muslim. So it shows that the one who's traveling, and if the person and one chooses to fast, then they're allowed to do so. Then you have a next discussion where the ulama discuss which is afdal, sawm fi safar am fitr, which is more preferred for the person who's traveling. Is it better? Which is preferred, which is more recommended for a person while traveling to fast, or for the person not to fast? On this matter, there's a khilaf between the ulama. So on this matter, regarding which is preferred, to fast or not to fast as a traveler, then there's a khilaf between the ulama on this matter. They mention that of the ulama, that based upon different ahadith, some hadith it mentioned regarding that, kind of somewhat, where the Prophet ﷺ, he chastised individual who fast while they were traveling, and hadith where allowance was given. So as we mentioned, the hadith that was mentioned before, where regarding the hadith of Anas, the Prophet, we mentioned, كُنَّا نُسَافِرْ مَا نَبِيَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ, that we used to travel the Prophet ﷺ, فَلَمْ يُعِبْ الصَّاهِمْ عَلَى مُفْتِرٍ, where the one, while they were traveling with the Prophet ﷺ, amongst them, those that were fasting, and they did not criticize those that were not muftir. Wala muftir ala sahim. Nor the ones who were not fasting did not criticize those that were fasting. So we find that it shows an allowance. It shows that there is an allowance. Then they mention regarding concern of the ulama who says that it is preferred, as they mentioned there, that ila anna as-sawm afdal min al-fitr. That of the ulama, and amongst those we have the Hanafiya, the Malikiyya, also the Shafi'iyya and the Hanabila, that they are of the view that it is anna as-sawm afdal, that a person who is traveling, it is preferred anna as-sawm afdal min al-fitr, for a person who is traveling, for him to fast and not to break his fast. If he does not find difficulty in fasting, so the person does not find difficulty while traveling, then he should still fast and not break off his fast. And they mentioned regarding concern this matter that, as we mentioned, that regarding concern, they mentioned the hadith before that if you wish, and other hadith where they mentioned the hadith the Prophet that I mentioned, wa in shit fasum, wa in shit fa-aftar. But they mentioned that added to this that it is always, they mentioned that to fast, which is concerned the person that doing is fasting, which is that al-bara'a dhimma, where a person can somewhat have fulfill what is required in the quickest time. That's always better, which is a sawm. So in the month of Ramadan, bara'a dhimma, for a person to free himself of that obligation of fasting at that time, that is better. So the person do it by ada'an, then that is preferred, while the person to make up later. So they mentioned that, so it becomes fasting while traveling become preferred, as the person will be fulfilling that which is able, especially if there's no difficulty on him. And they mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in a hadith, they mentioned laysat min al-bir, so they mentioned that's their view. They mentioned that is their view regarding, for them it's preferred for the person to fast to fulfill that obligation rather than do it later. So that's concerning that view. A second opinion of the ulama that they mention, that they take the view that is preferred and al-fitr lil-musafir afdal, that what is preferred is for the person who is traveling, it is better for him to break his fast, not to fast while he's traveling. So while traveling, for him to observe al-fitr and not to fast while traveling. And the evidence for this, they mentioned hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he stated in the hadith, as he stated, laysa min al-bir as-sawm fi safar. Laysa min al-bir, it is not of piety that the one, or goodness, or a form of religious duty, as-sawm fi safar, for a person to fast while he's traveling. So it is kind of somewhat criticizing of those that fast while they're traveling. And they mentioned of those, the other view respond by mentioning that this is regard concern those people who found it difficult and making things difficult on themselves. So the Prophet ﷺ was more criticizing of those that were fasting and kind of some found it difficult, but they're still trying to fast. So they're trying to still fast, but they found it difficult. They were trying to see shade together and all bungling up together. So the Prophet is kind of somewhat chastised and said, laysa min al-bir as-sawm fi safar. It's not of piety when you find it difficult that you still try to fast while you're traveling. So they mentioned that's their response to that hadith. And this view is the view they mentioned, ذهب Hanabila in the madhab, so the view of the Hanabila in the madhab, that's their opinion. And also others, they mentioned Ibn al-Gubar al-Maliki, also of this view, and also Ibn Habib, and also others who of this view that is preferred for the person who is traveling, that he does not fast. And also they mentioned the hadith the Prophet mentioned, alaykum bi rukhsatillah, that you should take of the concession of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, alladhi rakhasa lakum, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have granted you. So the Prophet mentioned that there's these concessions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have granted you, given you of this concerning in these so you should take of it. So they mentioned that based upon this, that these leniency, these concessions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have granted of those concessions, that a person is allowed to not fast while traveling. So one should take this, one should take of this. So those are of the evidence that they use, and of those who mentioned that goes back to what is that al-khiyar, that of ulama mentioned that based upon khiyar ma wa ashal, as what the person think is easier and better for him. So the person believes that to maintain his siyam is better for him and there's no difficulty, then he do so. He does so, and the person who finds difficulty in fasting, then he should not. Then a person who finds difficulty while traveling and fasting, then he should not. So those are of how they try to look at those different evidence. That's concerning that discussion on that topic. So the person who's traveling, that as mentioned by some of the hadith, فَإِنْ شِئْتَ فَصُمْ, if you are able and you can do so with no difficulty, then fast. وَإِنْ شِئْتَ فَأَفْتِرْ, and if you chooses and that you want to do so to break your fast, then you can do so. You can do so. So that's the view of the ulama on this matter. They discuss the next matter, that regarding safar, we'll end with this one, regarding a safar, that if the person who wish to, who wish to travel, and the intent is there, the preparation is there to travel that day. So the person the ticket is booked, everything is in place, the person have packed his bag, and is expected to travel a day in Ramadan, one of the days of Ramadan. Then they mentioned regarding concerns, is it allowed for the person, at what point the person that allowed to break his fast? So as traveling, you're a traveler, at what point you are allowed to break your fast? With me? No. So on that matter, they mentioned you have halat. So in that case of a person, regarding a person who is traveling, at what point can he break his fast? So they mentioned that one, the person who's traveling, and he's going to start his journey, his travel, he's going to leave his home before Fajr. He's going to travel out 2 o'clock at night, he's on the move, so that person then is clear. It's before Fajr. So there's no answer a person for that the person, when he leaves, that the person mentioned, in that case is clear. So he would, so for that person, that he can, when he leaves his city, then he can begin his fast. Then the next case they mentioned is the person of that case is a person who intends to fast, and or a person who intends to travel, and the preparation is made, and things are in place. Is the person allowed to break his fast from his house before leaving his city? So he's still within his city boundaries. He's still at his house. Is he, and it is during the daylight hours of Ramadan, is he allowed to break his fast from the point that before leaving the boundaries of his city? So at his house, can he in his house, he's going to go into the car, drive to the airport. At that point, is he allowed to break his fast? So already, it's at his house. He's at his house. A khilaf between ulama, slight khilaf between ulama, where Jumhur mentioned a person is not allowed, A'immat al-Arba, that a person is not allowed to break his fast until at his house, until he has leave the city boundaries of his city. So for example, we're in London or whatever city. So the person is not allowed to, so I'm going to travel, it's the flight is 10 o'clock. That I mentioned the person that he has to fast that morning, and when he leave the city, reach the airport, which is right outside London, then he's allowed to break his fast. But it cannot be done within, nor at his house, because he's still considered to be muqim, which is he's still residential. So as long as he's still considered to be residential, then he's not allowed to break his fast until he leave the boundaries of his city. He's outside the city. You have some athar and some of the salaf, a few that they mentioned, Asr al-Basri, and also others, that Anas ibn Malik, that he had intended, so Anas ibn Malik, that he had intended to travel. So everything was prepared. His mount, his ride was ready, and also he was wearing his clothing for safar. Then he mentioned فَدَعَا بِطَعَامٍ, so he called someone to bring him food. فَأَكَلَ, and then he ate from this, and he ate from this. Then he mentioned فَقِيلَ لَهُ, then he mentioned فَقِيلَ لَهُ السُنَّةِ, then a person asked him, is this from the sunnah, where he was eating while he's still at home, but he's intending to travel? So everything was prepared, he asked for food. So he seems that he already that he asked for the food, then he ate. Then I mentioned, فَقِيلَ لَهُ, that was said to him, Sunnah, is this what you're doing from the Sunnah? Then I mentioned, فَقَال, then Anas mentioned, Sunnah. This is from the Sunnah. This is from the Sunnah. They mentioned, ثُمَّ رَكِبَ. Then he rode off. So he broke his fast before he left the city, within the city boundaries, from his home. So they mentioned that majority of ulama kind of somewhat of the view that that's ijtihad from that Sahabi, Anas, but the call of Jumhur of the ulama that a person is not allowed to do so while he's still within his city boundaries. He's not allowed to do so while he's in his city boundaries. So you have that khilaf between the ulama on that particular topic. Ahwat, for a person that they mentioned also the same regarding Al-Hasan al-Basri, that what is ahwat, what is better for a person to stay away from this khilaf is that the person that he does what is qawl jumhur, that he only breaks his fast until he have leave the city, his boundary, the city of his leave his city, until he has leave his city. Then he can break off his fast, not while he's inside, not while he's inside. It is mentioned by Ibn Munzir where he states, باب الوقت الذي للمسافر أن يفطر فيه عند خروجه. So we have a discussion regarding that, that the person who's traveling, that he is not allowed to break his fast until he has leave his city, until he has leave his city. But we mentioned that's also the state that's a khilaf between ulama, something that is discussed in contemporary time. But as we mentioned, that qawl jumhur of the ulama ahwat, it is preferred, or it is better for the person to go with the view of jumhur of the ulama. So that's concerning what you mentioned regarding, or some of the points related to al-musafir. Then of the points you mentioned, that the next point you discussed concerning man yubih al-fitr, of those people who are allowed to break off their fast. You mentioned one, the one who ghalabat al-jaw wal-atash, the one who is very hungry and thirsty, the person who's a musafir. Then he mentioned the third group of people. لو خافت حامل أو مرضع على نفس أو على نفسهما أو على والديهما. Then he mentioned that as for the woman the pregnant lady and the one who's breastfeeding, if they fear for themselves, أو على والديهما, or they fear for their children, for their child, أفترى وقضتا, and also that they break their fast and they make up. ولكن تفديا عند الخوف على ولد لكل يوم مد. So he mentioned the next of those group of people that are allowed to break their fast. He mentioned hamil, mar, and also the hamil, the pregnant lady, and al-murda, and the one who's breastfeeding. So what's the ruling regarding, as he mentioned here, that if they fear, according to what he mentioned here, لو خافت, if they fear, على نفسهما, they fear for these two groups of women, they fear for their pregnancy or breastfeeding, they have a fear that for themselves or for the child. Then he mentioned aftarata wa qadata, that they should break off their fast and they should make up. That they should break off their fast and they should make up. On this matter, that you find that the ulama, they mention, they discuss regarding, in this case, that woman, I have some notes of At-Tirmidhi. Where is it? So they mention regarding concerning of this matter, regarding concerning the case regarding the woman who's pregnant and the woman who's breastfeeding, al-hamil wal al-murda, regarding those cases that it is mentioned by At-Tirmidhi, or the ulama mentioned that an ittifaq al-fuqaha ala anna al-hamil wal murda an yaftara, that both these two group of women, the one who is pregnant and the one who's breastfeeding, that is allowed for them, yaftar, fi Ramadan, that they can break off their fast in Ramadan, in khafata ala nafsihima, if they fear for themselves, or ala walidayhima, or they fear for their children. Then they mentioned that, the reason of that fear, it could be al-marad, that they fear that they may get ill, or both, either them, or they're pregnant for their pregnancy, or the one who's breastfeeding, their fear of illness, or ziyadatu, or they fear that things might become intense for both, or darar, or they fear a darar, any form of harm will come to them or their child, or halak, or any form of destruction. So if they fear these things, then it's a reason for them to break their fast. So the one who's breastfeeding or the one who's pregnant, if they fear sickness or somewhat difficulties or will come to them or for them or for their child, then they are allowed to break off their fast. They are allowed to break off the fast. And as mentioned, ittifaq al-fuqaha. That's an agreement between the fuqaha. Then they discuss the next matter, that for these two group of people, that if they, it is mentioned from the Prophet ﷺ where he states regarding what to be done regarding if they were to break their fast. فقال, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, قال إن الله تعالى وضع عن المسافر الصوم وشطر الصلاة. That he mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentioned وضع meaning خفف. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have given a concession for the person who is a musafir regarding his fasting, and also شطر الصلاة, and also for him to lessen his salah. Then he mentioned وعن الحامل والمرضع, and also that he mentioned a next group of people, which is عن الحامل والمرضع, and also that regarding concerning that the one who said to be pregnant and the one who is breastfeeding, للصوم أو صيام, that also that a concession has been given for them also regarding a صوم, or they mentioned أو صيام. So they mentioned a صوم أو صيام. Some narration mentioned أو حبلى أو المرضع, the one who's pregnant or the one who's breastfeeding. They mentioned hadith in the Tirmidhi, and all the hadith to be Hasan, that the Prophet ﷺ in this hadith have mentioned Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have given this concession for a certain group of people, of them musafir regarding his siyam and also his salat. But also that concession has been also extended to the one who is pregnant and the one that is breastfeeding regarding this sawm, regarding their siyam. So it mentioned that they also have this concession regarding that they are allowed to break off their fast. They are allowed to not fast, as we mentioned, if they find it difficult, any type of difficulty. Then At-Tirmidhi rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned وَالْعَمَلْ عَلَى هَذَا إِنْدَ بَعْدَ عَلِ الْإِلْمِ, that regarding that hadith, that the ulama have acted upon that hadith. Then they mentioned قَالَ بَعْدَ عَلِ الْإِلْمِ, then started to discuss concerning this case of those two group of people, the woman who is pregnant and the one breastfeeding. الْحَامِلْ وَالْمَرْضَعِ تَفْتَرَانِ, that both that they should break up their fast, وَتَقْدِيان, and also they should make up, وَتَطْعِمَان, and also that they should feed a poor person. They should feed a poor person. So the one who's said to be hamil and the one who said to be marda', he mentioned that of the ulama, that what to be done, they break their fast, one. Second, that yaqdiyan, they make up that day after Ramadan. And third, tat'iman, and also, or tut'iman, and also they feed a poor person for each day that is missed. And I mentioned وَبِهِ يَقُولُ, and of those ulama take this position, Sufyan, yani al-Thawri, Malik, wa Shafi, wa Ahmed. So of the view taken by those of the ulama, that the one who is said to be hamil, the pregnant lady, and the one who is breastfeeding, if they were to break their fast, what is to be done after, what to be done? One, feed a poor person for each day missed, and also they make up for that day that is missed. So two things to be done: feeding of a poor person and making up the days that were missed. That's the view taken by Sufyan, Malik, Shafi, wa Ahmed. Then he mentioned وَقَالْ بَعْضُهُمْ, then also he mentioned that some of the ulama take the position تُفْتِران, that if they were to break their fast, they are allowed to break their fast. وَتُطْعِمَان, and they feed a poor person for each day that is missed. وَلَا قَضَى عَلَيْهِمَا, and there's no qada, there's nothing for them to make up after. Then I mentioned وَبِهِ يَقُولُ Ishaq. Then I mentioned the one who take this position, Ishaq ibn Rahuya. So with this view, he mentioned that a second opinion of the ulama for a woman who is pregnant and a one who is breastfeeding, that if she was to break her fast, not to fast, then what she should do is to feed a poor person for each day that is missed, and she does not la qada alayhima, and they do not make up after. They do not make up. So only one thing to be done: you just feed a poor person for each day. Then the next opinion of the ulama mentioned that either they mentioned that break off the fast وتطعمان أو أو يقضيان. So either they break their fast. So if they were to break their fast, either they would feed a person or make up. They feed a poor person or make up. So they don't combine between both. So one of the two, either you feed, or if she can make it up later, then she make it up, but she does not do both. She does not do both. And as for if she have to feed a person, then the amount of food to be given, it should be a mud, I will mention, like a medium and full of rice, or a meal, or a normal meal is given to a poor person for each day that is missed. A poor person, so they feed a poor person for each day that is missed. So that's the aqwal of the ulama on that particular matter regarding, as you mentioned here, the case concerning al-hamil wal-murda. So again, and Allahu alam, that the view regarding that for them to combine between the three, but it's taken by for them to break their fast, then feed a person, and then to make up that days. They mentioned there's no clear dalil for this, that to combine between both. There's no evidence regarding combine between both. You find some of the Sahaba or some of the Salaf may have that view, but there's no clear hadith, explicit hadith regarding the Prophet ﷺ somewhat combining someone, commanding that both those things be done together, to feed and also to make up. There's no clear evidence regarding that method of what to be done if fasting was missed. So the second view, either if they choose to feed a person for each day that is missed, then that's sufficient, and they do not make up. Or if they choose, they believe they can make up after, then that's sufficient. They just make up and they do not feed a person for each day that is missed. So one or the other, but not to combine between both. Not to combine between both. Huh? Huh?
That's the strongest view, what you just said.
That's the strongest view?
Is that, I'm asking, is that
That's a view that I'm more inclined towards. So the view of Ishaq,
I hear the Mu'allif when he mentions, do you understand this when he says, وَلَكِنْ تَفْتِيَانِ عِنْدَ الْخَوْفِ عَلَى الْوَلَدِ? Is the Mu'allif here saying only if they fear for the child but not for themselves? They separate that as well.
Someone said,
mentioned all three, but is that specifically to them, or is that to the walad and them, or is it separated the two? If it's just for the child, then they do this, and if it's for themselves, then they do both, or one of the two.
some of the ulama, they go into that detail because they discuss the woman and also the child separate. But instead, I just mention what is, so overall though, concerning what is mentioned regarding at-Tirmidhi, that can somewhat break it down, concerning if there's a fear for whether for themselves or the child, is the same thing. You understand? So whether to separate between, if she, for example, not the fear was for herself, is more so for the child, some see it as different, but in reality, the case is still the same. They're still the same. You understand? That they're fair, so if she's pregnant, if she fear for herself or for the child, of either marad or halak, or ziyarat al-marad, any of those things that may affect or halak for her or a child, the same thing applies, whether for one or for both. For one or for both. Some separate between a mother and the child, that's a next discussion. So to keep it simple, that it fall into those three groups that we mentioned, if they are fear for either herself or for the child. Now, does she, if she break her fast, what she does after? What they do after. Then he mentioned after then, the next matter that he discussed, that walakin yawm mud. So each day that they miss, then they mentioned that they would feed a person of the amount, the least amount regarding a mud, a least amount, that of a mud. Then he mentioned the next matter, that he mentioned, ولا يجب الصوم رمضان إلا برؤية الهلال. That he mentioned إلا هم. That the next matter that he discussed, that لا يجب صوم رمضان إلا برؤية الهلال, that it is not allowed for one to fast the month of Ramadan, except which is concerned, so how to confirm the how to confirm the starting of the month of Ramadan, how to decide that Ramadan has begun. They mentioned that one إلا برؤية الهلال, that one way is the seeing or the sighting of the hilal, the new crescent. وإن هم, I will discuss. ووجبت استكمال الشعبان 30. So either the person, the ways that are mentioned, that the start of Ramadan, one method is the sighting of the moon, the hilal for Ramadan, and the second that they mention is the completion of the month of Shaban, 30 days. So on that discussion that we just mentioned, regarding concern that of this method that they mentioned regarding the start of Ramadan, that as he said, that of the ways is to determine the start of Ramadan is through the sighting of the hilal, the sighting of the hilal, which is the new moon, which is the new moon. Or the second method is the way of completion of the month of 30 days, the completion of the month of 30 days. With this matter, that regarding concerning that the ulama mentioned regarding concerning with this matter, with the Prophet ﷺ have stated that they said regarding concerning the sighting of the moon, that so regarding the sight of the moon, of the method they discussed, so of the method they discussed concerning that the ways to start, they mention normally two ways. Some may add a third method. So they mention the two common ways, or the two ways that there are other ways, the two main ways that they mention. That one, that the sighting of the hilal of the month of Ramadan, and they mentioned the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that discussed concerning this matter, where he mentioned the hadith call, where he said concerning sumu لرؤيتي وأفطروا لرؤيتي وإن غم عليكم فأكملوا عدة شعبان 30. So from this hadith that is mentioned in Bukhari, where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the hadith, where he mentioned that sumu لرؤيتي, that you should fast if you were to see of the moon. So they mentioned that وأفطروا لرؤيتي, so you start commencement of Ramadan by the seeing of the moon, and also you end Ramadan with the seeing of the moon, the new moon. So that's one method. Then they mention فإن غم, they mention فإن غبي, in this narration, in غبي عليكم فأكملوا عدة شعبان 30. And if the one are unable, it was blocked. So I mentioned if it is blocked, then you would unable to spot the moon that night, the 29th, then you will add to Shaban, you will make Shaban 30 nights. You make Shaban 30 nights, and after then, the next day, you automatically comes Ramadan. So those are the two methods mentioned in this hadith. Those two methods that I mentioned in the hadith, that either the seeing of the hilal of the start of Ramadan, and also the end of Ramadan is the same. And if you're unable to see it, then you will count the month of Shaban as being 30 days. Count the month of Shaban 30 days, and then automatically you start. So that's concerning what you mentioned regarding that particular matter. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that you mentioned in Shar Tisa wa Ishrun, that the month for us it is 29 days. وَلَا تَصُومُوا حَتَّى تَرَوْا هِلَالٍ, and do not fast until you see the hilal. وَلَا تُفْتِرُوا حَتَّى تَرَوْهُ, and also do not stop fasting Ramadan until you see the hilal. وَإِنْ غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ فَاقْدِرُوا لَهُ, and if you're unable to see it, then you can somewhat have a discussion between ulama concerning faqdirula, as to what is intended by faqdirula. Does it mean that you should lessen, or should kind of see it as that the month is a bit short? But overall, the Prophet mentioned that the month is normally 29, but in the hadith before it mentioned it could be 30. Those are the two days that we have regarding decided the month of Ramadan. If it is seen, then one start fasting. If it is not, then you just count that day as being 30 days. You count the other days as being 30 days for the month of Shaban, and then the other day become Ramadan. The other day become Ramadan. That's what he mentions there regarding that case. So if it is clear and it is seen, then the people start fasting the next day. If it was unclear, where one did not see of the hilal for that night or for that evening, then that day, the next day is considered to be still the month of Shaban of 30 days. And then after then Ramadan starts automatically. So like a 2-day time period to decide the start of Ramadan. The next day they discuss, or he mentions concerning what he discussed, they mention, ثُمَّ يَصُومُونَ, then the people start fasting. So either one of those two methods, that which of the two, then that will be of the two, the method in which the person start fasting Ramadan. وَإِنْ رُؤِيَ نَهَارًا فَهُوَ لَيْلَةُ الْمُسْتَقْبَلَةِ. They mentioned that if you were to see the hilal during the day, then either if it is before zawal, before dhuhr, it is counted as that the scene of the hilal was saw during the day. Then it is counted as for the day before. If it is seen after zawal, then it's counted as the day coming, the next day. So you have that discussion between the ulama. But then he mentioned after then, وَإِنْ رُؤِيَ فِي بَلَدٍ دُونَ بَلَدٍ, if it is seen in one place and not another. فَإِنْ تَقَارَبَ, but if those two places, those two cities or those two countries, that they're close to each other, أَمَّتْ الْحُكُمْ, then the hukum, it applies to both. The hukum, it applies general. إِلَّا فَلَا, except then no. وَالْبُعْدْ بِالْإِخْتِلَافِ الْمَطَالِعِ كَالْحِجَاز وَالْعِرَاقِ وَالْمِصْرِ وَقِيلَ بِمَسَافَةِ الْقَصْرِ. So he mentioned the next matter which is discussed regarding the start of Ramadan. If there's a difference, as he mentioned, if it is seen in one location and not seen in another, in a neighboring city or a neighboring country, if they're close to each other, then the ruling, it applies. Al-hukum, the hukum, it applies to both because they are close in location. وَإِلَّا, if they are not, فَلَا, then no. لِبُعْد, why? لِبُعْد بِالْإِخْتِلَافِ الْمَطَالِعِ, because of the difference in the different regions or hemisphere. So he mentioned a matter to discuss between the fuqaha I mentioned, and before this, and then discuss concerning a matter between the fuqaha that is discussed, which is mentioned, the matter that is called اختلاف المطالع. اختلاف المطالع. So if you have different hemisphere, different regions, where does the Muslim, if one country was to see the hilal or one location was to see the hilal, is upon the other locations or countries, should they follow? Or each country, each location, each area have their own independent sighting, or they call concern that they said that the more the sighting for all, what they call it? Universe, not unanimous. Where so should everyone, they say, should follow a regional sighting or a global sighting? The word a global meaning global. If one country, Muslim country, was to say they saw the hilal, is it obliged upon others to follow suit, even though they didn't see it? So the fact that one country spotted it, then is it for the others amongst the Muslim to follow and accept this? Or should each region have their own independent sighting? So the people in North America have their own sighting. The people in Africa have their own sighting. The people in Asia have their own sighting. The people in Europe have their own sighting. So different regions, should they have their own independent sighting or not? Or each country have their own separate sighting? On this matter, they mentioned, as the ulama mentioned regarding concerning this matter, so according to what he mentioned here, if the countries are close to each other, they mention, if they're close to each other, then the ruling, it applies to all. The ruling applies to if they're close together. If their distance, they are away from each other, far apart from each other, then it does not. Then it does not, according to what is mentioned here. And this matter regarding whether you find a local or a global sighting, so they find an international or what they call global international sighting, where all follow one sighting, or unified sighting, different wordings. so should all go with the one who sees it first? On this matter, you find the ulama khilaf. So on this matter, you khilaf between the ulama ala qawlayn. So of those who mention to follow the global sighting, or you call it what? Unified sighting. So of those who mention that we should have a unified sighting. So if one sees it, Allah should follow. And those who mention no, so that the ones who say yes, we go with a unified global sighting, that I mentioned that regarding concerning the hadith or ayat that discusses concerning starting off fasting, it mentioned it in a unified fashion. So I mentioned that Allah subhanahu mentioned it when it mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, where it is mentioned. Hey, Sheikh, تفضل. حنفية في المذهب، المالكية في المذهب، بعد الشافعية وحنابلة في المذهب. Then the second opinion that they take the opinion, and both sides they mentioned, both sides also use this as the evidence, that they mentioned the incident occurred with Ibn Abbas. So Ibn Abbas, that the hadith of Ibn Abbas regarding Qurayb. So Qurayb, Anna Fadl bint al-Harith, that she sent Qurayb to Muawiyah in Sham. So he was from Medina and he was sent to Sham, in Sham, where Muawiyah was then in charge over there. Then I mentioned that فَقَدِمْتُ أَشَامْ. So when I arrived in Sham, فَقَدَيْتُ حَاجَتُهُ. Then I mentioned that then he fulfilled of his haja, his needs. Then I mentioned that the hilal was sighted for Ramadan. The hilal was sighted for Ramadan. وَأَنَا بِشَامْ. And he was still in Sham when Ramadan started and they have sighted the moon. Then I mentioned رَأَيْتُ الْهِلَالِ لَيْلَةُ الْجُمَعَةِ. And that we saw, or he saw, the hilal, the moon for Ramadan on the night of Jummah. Then I mentioned that ثُمَّ قَدِمْتُ الْمَدِينَةِ. Then later on in the month of Ramadan, he went back to Medina في شهر Ramadan, and it was still in the month of Ramadan, the end of Ramadan. They mentioned في آخر الشهر في آخر شهر Ramadan. They mentioned that then so Qurayb came back to Medina, and he mentioned that they spotted the hilal for Ramadan on Jummah night, on the night of Jummah. They mentioned when he came back to Medina, Salani Abdullah ibn Abbas. So Ibn Abbas, when he met up with Qurayb, and he mentioned ثم ذكر الهلال. So he mentioned to him about the hilal. So they mentioned فقال. So Ibn Abbas, he said to Qurayb, متى رأيتم الهلال. When did you all over that saw the hilal? فقلت. So Qurayb, he says, قلت. Then I respond to him, I say to him, رأيناه ليلة الجمعة. That we saw the hilal on the night of Jummah. Then he said, فقال أنت رأيته. They mentioned رأيته. Did you see it? قلت نعم. Yes, I did see it myself. Then they mentioned فقال then they mentioned that the people fasted for Salma al-Muawiyah, then Muawiyah and everyone fasted upon seeing of the hilal. Then they mentioned then فقال لكننا. Then meaning concerned Ibn Abbas, now commenting on what he have already said, ولكننا رأيناه ليلة السبت. But as for us, we saw the hilal of this Ramadan, ليلة السبت, the night, Saturday night. So they saw it when? Friday. And that's what the people of Sham with Muawiyah. As for those in Medina with Ibn Abbas, that they mentioned that we saw it the night after, which was Saturday night. فقال فلا نزال نصوم. They mentioned that we continue to fall حتى نقبل 30, until either the month it completes of 30 days or أو نراه, or we see it. So they mentioned concerning this matter, they mentioned أولا نكتفي برؤية المعاوية وصيام. Then Qurayb said, should we not just suffice with what the sighting of Muawiyah and them fasting up there? فقال يعني, then Ibn Abbas mentioned لا هكذا أمرنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So Ibn Abbas, so Qurayb was saying, we Muawiyah sight and they are in charge, so shouldn't we just go with him? So Ibn Abbas said, no, لا, we are not. So they had 2 different days, but one said, so 2 different days, so different cities or region saw the hilal on different days. Those in Sham, they saw it on the Friday night, so they started, and those in Medina, in Hijaz, they saw it on the Saturday night, so a day behind. So a day behind. But Ibn Abbas, he still insisted on fast and on going according to when they saw it and not following those of Muawiyah. So from this, the ulama mentioned that this hadith, it shows that a difference in different region. So the people in Sham did go according to what they saw, and those who were in Medina went according to what they saw, because there's a difference. So they mentioned that overall, that shows a difference between both those 2 regions. One side one night, and the other side the next night, but both follow what they saw. Both follow what they saw. With that matter, they mentioned that the reality of today, that whatever that they mentioned the matter now, the reality of the matter, that it goes back to, as some of the ulama mentioned of contemporary, it goes back to the person, he follows the country that you're within. So one, regarding the sighting of the hilal, the starting of Ramadan, you go according to what is established in your country. So, and like in every Muslim country, that it have a lajna, a panel of individuals or a group, which is the Qudat or some of the Mashaykh, that they are responsible regarding to define or to verify the starting of the month. So if that country, by the system that they have in place, and it's a credible system, if they decide to fast and put that within, which is the days that is allowed, then one go with your country. So if you're in a particular country, you go with them. So if you're in Egypt and the date is decided in Egypt, you go with them. If you're in Saudi, the date decided, you go with them. You're in Malaysia, you go the day with them. Unless you find a case where the difference is outside 2 days. So if you start to exceed, a country is delaying starting 3 days onwards, then that's wrong. Then someone has made an error. And sometimes we'll find in some country they'll be 3 days behind. Then for sure someone made an error. The one who 3 days behind, then that's problematic. And sometimes due to political reasons or other reasons, then you'll find that at times, certain countries, sometimes they're 3 days behind everyone else. So if there's a day out, one start on Saturday, one start on Sunday, that's still reasonable. And within the Sharia. And none should see the other as being incorrect. So if you're in a region or in a country that starts on a Friday night and still within what is acceptable that night, for them was the 29th, then you go with them. Or another country where they start the night after, I would say it's still within that reasonable days of difference, then you go with them. If it's a 2 days difference, then you go with them. Which is one to remove regarding what we find today, that in one country, in one house, in one city, some fasting Thursday and other fasting Friday. Then that's a problem. So you find in the same Muslim country, a group of people that they're fasting on a Thursday, and we find that those who may do after said, no, we do not go with the state. Whatever the state decide, we're not going with them. Then those people, then that become things that is a hizbiyah that one should not follow. So even if you may disagree in some sense, so whatever going on in that country, that if you find that people are responsible for the mashaykh who decide that the hilal, and it still said within the days that are acceptable, go with them. And do not persist. So don't go that, if you're in that country, don't go with a sheikh from the next country. You go with the people from your country, so as to remove the differences between the people within that country. To remove any difference you find in one city, in one country, some fasting one day, Thursday, others fasting Fridays, in the same house, different days, then that's a problem. So to remove those things, then stick with what is established in that particular country, the Muslim country, and go with them. As for non-Muslim country, then go to the country that the masjid you believe is most reliable. Go to the countries that you believe that their system is most reliable. Go to the country that you believe their system is somewhat very, as I said, transparent, very clear as to the procedure they follow regarding the hilal, and also they have a robust system regarding it is done also monthly, not just for Ramadan. So if a country has a system where every month they have a process in verifying the start of the month, and that goes throughout the year, and they have credible people that are involved, then said go to the people that they believe to be most trustworthy, or the masjid, most of the masjid that you pray most often or live local with, and they are people of Sunnah. So if you live in a locality and the masjid is known to be of the people of Sunnah, and they have Tullabul Ilm that know of these things, and they're still within that which is reasonable, go with them. And avoid the people of Mukhalifin, the people who somewhat that they are known to be of Ahli Bidah wa Ahwa. On that matter, inshallah ta'ala, will end and continue next week. Wabillahi ta'ala, tawfiq. Next week, guys, next week. Or tomorrow.